So back in 2018 and 2019, I spent, I think it was 31 or 32 days in total in Whistler, British Columbia, beautiful place, with our next guest to learn NLP and a thousand other things that blew my mind and the minds of other coaches I was there with, blew my mind every day. So my goal is to give you a little slice of that. You won't get 32 days, but you'll get a little slice of that. Gina Mollicone-Long helps people get what they want. She's an international best-selling author, compelling speaker, and peak performance coach with a mission to reveal greatness in individuals, teams, and organizations. She's the co-founder of the Greatness Group, a global team building and personal development company. Since 1998, she's trained, coached, or spoken to tens of thousands of people on 6 continents. Her books, Think or Sink and The Secret of Successful Failing, are widely read and enjoyed by people around the world. She can show you exactly how to get your own way. Gina, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to it.
Let's
First
dig
question.
right in.
Yeah, something right from the beginning of your bio, and something I know you're amazing at is I have a real simple question. I'm sure it's a 10-second answer. What keeps people from getting what they want?
Well, I think the biggest answer is the obstacles that are in the way. I mean, if you want my real answer,
No, give me the bullshit answer, and then
so I was
we'll
going
come
to
back to
say
the real one.
what keeps people from getting for what they want is the bullshit that goes on up here that they think is real, that they then act according to this. It's the story, right? So a nicer way of saying that is the obstacles that prevent people from getting what they want, such as limiting decisions, negative emotions, lack of belief, or values that are misplaced, just prevent them from accessing an infinite number of possibilities or probabilities, right? So, and somewhere on my website it says every reality is possible, but not every reality is probable, right? And so you will get what's most probable for you based on how you're conditioned up here.
So let's start talking about how we condition that, right? We know the lens of this show is always about creating a better leadership team. And we'll
Yes.
talk about some team stuff, but we also know that you can't lead a great team, you can't be part of a great team unless you could lead yourself. And it sounds like what we're saying here, Gina, is one of the first things we need to do is change the stories we're telling ourselves in our head. So you talked about a little bit, you mentioned limiting decisions, negative beliefs. Say a little bit more about how do we figure out first what those stories are that we're telling ourselves, and then we can dive into what we do about it.
Well, it's not rocket science. It's the stuff that comes out of your mouth. I mean, you know as well as I do here's the thing. What we tell ourselves and how we perceive the world and how we frame reality is personal. We don't realize that it's different for every person. I mean, I think, an important factor, this is, goes back to some evidence from the 50s where the computer scientists showed we're trying to make the computer model the human brain. And they showed empirically that there were millions of bits of information, right, available out here, outside your meat suit. And the brain was constrained and could only process 126 bits a second. Now, this is very technical paper from the 50s. Fast forward to where we are now, and I generalize that by saying, look, there's millions and billions and trillions of bits of information here, out here, available in what we'll call capital R reality. Then you filter almost all of it. I mean, 99.9996% or something into hundreds. So we go millions, billions, trillions, hundreds of bits of information that become our story, if you will, or our map of reality. I call it little r reality. And once that's in our mind, that is real. So it's real because it's in our mind, but it's not capital R real because there are millions and billions of trillions of bits of information. Like I said, all realities are possible. This is a bit of quantum physics, but not all realities are probable. And so the filtering mechanism, I mean, if we really had to say, if the call got cut off right now and there was like one thing, It's the filtering mechanism that we filter the millions and billions and trillions into hundreds that determines our choices for behavior. And those choices for behavior determine 100%, somewhere over my shoulder, 100%, it says that determines our results, right? Thoughts, feelings, actions, results. Now, those filters are made up of what we believe, what we don't believe, what we value, what we don't value, what we tell ourselves, what we don't tell ourselves, limiting decisions, limiting beliefs, negative emotions, past experiences. That all makes up the filtering mechanisms. And that's basically what NLP does in a nutshell, is unlayer, the mechanisms, the filters. So
And
that,
I want to jump in, Gina,
yeah,
because I actually did. You'll get a kick out of this because I learned this from you. And I talk about the 11 million bits and the 126
yeah,
bits all the time. And I did the math, not the math on what percentage 126 of 11 million. That's easy math. But I went and I give two examples now to make it real that I want to give
hit me.
to the audience is and this math works. It's like judging your week based on a 6-second experience. That's one way to look at it. The other
Nice,
thing I get it,
nice.
I looked at, and again, I
Yeah,
did
yeah, oh, I like
it
this.
is, it's like thinking you've seen the Mona Lisa by looking at a piece of it no bigger than a grain of sand. That's what we're talking about. Like your
Those are
life is the
great.
Mona
That's
Lisa, but
amazing.
you see the grain of sand. So,
And
let's talk a little bit more about about what those filters are and how we can deal with those filters. But I want to paint that picture in case people don't get 126 to 11 million. It's a big deal.
oh,
Perception is reality, but what we perceive is such a small piece of reality.
and what people don't realize is whether you are aware of it or not, you are deciding what to perceive. So that's the good news, bad news. The bad news, I guess, is, you're deciding what you perceive. The good news is you can undecide. If you decided, you can undecide, but you kind of have to slow the process down, back it up, and look at it piece by piece. And so, we talk at Greatness U, we talk about mechanistic models of the mind. NLP is one of them. And, that doesn't mean we think human beings are machines. That's so far from the truth. It's not even crazy. I actually think the opposite. However, when we put on our mechanistic model hat and we go, okay, let's look at this baby like it is a machine, then we can tinker with those variables, i.e., the filters and the mechanisms that cause us to reject some bits and, accept other bits. And we can alter those relatively easily in the same way that we can sort of, fix the gasket or whatever in the car. And that's what a mechanistic model is. And the power of it is that it allows us to sort of, you know, without attachment, go in and fix a couple of things that are kind of clunky, like the filters.
So let's make this real. So just an hour ago,
Yeah.
I had a conversation with one of my client CEOs, and his perception, his little r
It's reality.
reality,
Sure.
right? His little r
It's real.
reality is that he's going through a cash crunch.
Sure.
He lost his biggest client.
Yep.
He's got to make some hard decisions on maybe letting some people go. That's his reality right now. And it is, of course, being a coach, we talked about a whole lot of things he could do to think about that differently and take action on it. But how do you, so when people hear, hey, I'm just focusing on the 126 bits and it's little r reality, not big R reality. Let's make it real. There are a lot of leaders out there that are having a difficult time in their business. How could a change in that filter or a change in how they're focusing? How do they do that? And how does it help them resolve their problem?
So, first thing out of the gate, I want to ask you a question. So, what type of person never hits an obstacle?
Somebody who's never moving.
Right. So, the only person who doesn't hit an obstacle is someone who's standing still, period. People need to get their head around this. So, right out of the gate, I'm guessing the people who watch and listen to this, they're not those people. They're not trying to stay still and, avoid life lest it be difficult. Now, so that being said, then what's happened is they've hit a bunch of obstacles, right? Now, here's the thing. First of all, it signals that you're moving. So right out of the gate, I want to reframe it to something that's not a bad thing. The problem is we view the obstacle like it shouldn't be there, right? And instead, what I'm going to invite people to think about is, what if that's not the path of least resistance to the goal? So, all this perturbation, as you described, and I just throw it into the bucket I call perturbation, is giving you the opportunity to use a different filter, a different skill set, a different belief, or quite frankly, to discard what no longer works and adopt a new reality. So here's the example I love to give, just so that, like, as a metaphor, you know how much I love my metaphors. You can get what I'm talking about. This is not a big deal. So back in the what's called the 90s, right? When I worked in like Procter and Gamble, you remember what it was like when they would come out with a new version of Microsoft Office, right? They would launch it like they currently launch, iPhones or whatever, right? Like, so all the early adopters would line up at the mall for a freaking software program, and they would get it and they would install it on their computer, and they'd send you an email, and the attachment would be Microsoft Word, whatever, 98 or whatever it was. And if you were running an old version of Microsoft Word, what would happen when you clicked on that document?
Yeah, you couldn't read it.
You couldn't even open it. At least now they're compatible. But back then, you couldn't open it. So there's your problem. There's your cash flow crunch, whatever you want to call it. Now, the solution is simply to go get the program, right? Like, that's the solution. It's not to blame them or scream at them or yell at the person who got in front of you in traffic or go to therapy or like that. None of that is the appropriate response. The appropriate response is to go upgrade the program. And the way you know which program to upgrade is it's the one that's broken. So wherever you have a perturbation in your life, wherever there's a air quote problem, and don't even get me started on the word problem, wherever you have this problem or obstacle is the actual program that is asking for the upgrade. Right now, it's not so simple in the sense that it doesn't come with a tag that says, whatever, Office 98, but it's the area, right? So, cash flow crunch, it could be a limiting decision about capability or about abundance. I don't know. I mean, you have to dig.
Explain what you mean when you say limiting decision.
So everybody uses the term limiting belief, and as you know, I'm a bit of a linguist, and I'm very particular. So everybody says, "Oh, I have these limiting beliefs," like there's something you can put in a wheelbarrow, right? But the thing is, there was a point in time when you didn't believe that. Okay, so I don't know when it is, but there was a point where you adopted the belief. You decided to believe the limiting belief. Hence, it is not a limiting belief, it is a limiting decision. And decisions are active, they put the cause back on you. So when you say, I have a limiting decision, then it's like, well, if it's not working for you, decide something else, which is a lot easier, by the way, than saying to someone, just believe something else. Because trust me, dude, I've studied epistemology. It is very different and difficult to just change a belief. There's a lot of layers of stuff, but it is very easy to make a different decision, which then changes the belief.
So again, making this real for the CEO that is going through a cash crunch, got to lay people off, is saying, man, is this all worth it? Me running this business, it's so stressful. Might one of those limiting decisions be?
Oh, I mean, the basics that come with every single meat suit on the planet is I'm not good enough. That's basic. I'm a fraud. I don't know how to do it. Right. Those are the basics. I mean, it pretty much, and some of my private clients are some of the most successful people on earth. Okay. And what shocks me is they all have those beliefs. And if I ask them point blank, and these are successful people, billionaires, actresses, like if you put them on a scale of humanity, everybody kind of wants to be them. But if you ask them point blank, if 10 is your maximum potential, where do you think you're operating? They'll say 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's shocking because they're super successful. And the more successful they are, the lower the number is, which blows my mind. So there's this element of compensation that turns up in these limiting decisions, and they're all, well, quite frankly, bullshit, right? It's this story that you tell yourself. And whenever you decided to believe it, it made so much sense. It protected you. It got you out of a sticky situation. It allowed you to stop, to fade into the woodwork. But it's a 98 program that you're trying to run in 2023, 24, 25, right? It doesn't make sense anymore. So it's showing up as air quote problems so that you'll fix it, so that you'll reprogram it. Period. It's so linear.
So the obstacle that's in your way, and this is a Ryan Holiday book. I'm going to steal the line, right? The obstacle, he's got his book is The Obstacle is the Way. And you're in a different way saying that obstacle is there to say, hey, you got to change your program.
Literally, my
You got to
first
change.
book was called The Secret of Successful Failing. Not a book about how to fail. That's like the worst book ever. It's a book that basically says, here's how you turn adversity into advantage, dude. Like it's the portal. And you know this because you've been there in the classroom with us, that the reframe is on the problem itself. It's the opportunity. Until you see it that way, you're only ever going to find out what's wrong instead of how it's leading you. And you know this, the unconscious part of our mind is super efficient. It doesn't go in a straight line. It goes in the path of least resistance, right? So the goal is faster and with less effort. You can see that over my shoulder there. That's my thing. Faster and with less effort. That's it. Just faster and with less effort. So it's not, if it was as easy as your conscious mind would say, for me to get from here to there, I just go straight like this. If it was that easy, everybody would have what they wanted, but they don't. And if it was even as easy as saying, oh, I have this belief, I'm just not going to believe it anymore, everybody would also do that. It's not quite that simple. You have to actually take a bona fide responsibility that you create your life. And that sucks for most people. So they just don't want to. They're like, eh. But the thing is, you can't operate at your peak without being responsible, because if you aren't responsible, then then your power is outside of you. It's not inside of you.
And the
Right?
challenge is what you are calling a limiting decision. If people don't take true responsibility for it and they say something, well, I'm just not good at building relationships, or I'm just not good at having those conversations, or I'm not good at selling, or I'm not good at whatever.
No one in
And
my family is,
and
right?
for me it might be, I've just never been disciplined about exercising. Like that's my thing. But we when we say that, and I say we because it's
Yeah,
every
we all
human
do
being
it.
that has this.
Me too.
I coach on a lot of the things I suck at. That's why I coach on it. It helps me be better.
We
But
teach what we need to learn.
yeah, so challenge is what you're calling a limiting decision. Many of us just think, no, that's just the way it is, because we don't take real responsibility for it. So if someone is has
But it
this
is the
limiting.
way it is. It is the way it is because those are the 126 bits they've selected. So it literally is the way it is. But what I hear to say is back up. It's like you with the Mona Lisa. Back up. Pick a different bucket. Like literally. And I could like dive into the quantum physics of this, right? Collapse a different waveform.
So again, to make it real and straightforward
Yep.
for folks, if someone listening to this is saying, I don't know, my business is, it's the economy. My business is
The
driven by the
economy.
economy. There's only so much I can do. It's the economy, right? That's
I
the
love the
limiting
economy.
decision
I
they've
love that
made.
one.
Step us through, because I imagine there are many people right now thinking that. Step us through, make it real. How do we change that limiting decision? How do we
Okay.
think about that differently?
Okay, let's do this because denominalizing is a big part of NLP. So I want to denominalize so people understand words like economy and recession. These sound like nouns, right? We say, oh, I can't do this because of the economy. We have a bad economy. Or, right now I can't make as much money because it's a recession or whatever, right? So in the English, in the linguistic structure of those sentences, those words act like nouns, right? They're usually the object or the subject. And so, if I take this Sharpie, it's a person, place, or thing. I can stick it in I don't have a wheelbarrow, but I do have this handy little cup, right? So I could stick it in this cup, but you can't put the economy or a recession in a cup or a wheelbarrow, which is a clue that it's not a noun. Okay. So this is NLP. NLP is very linguistic oriented. So let's denominalize it. Let's use recession because everybody thinks that's what's happening, right? So if the word is not really a noun, we have to turn it back into a process word. So the word recession is to recede, right? So in a recession, what's receding? I mean, you and I,
GD yeah, I mean,
GDP,
the
GDP,
GDP,
right?
right?
So in a recession, GDP is receding. I think technical terms are that it's 2 quarters of negative growth or something like this. I'm not an accountant, but
Unless the politicians want to define it differently
right. But
around
let's just say
election.
the
Yeah.
going definition is something like 2 quarters of negative whatever. And so what I say to people is, okay, so who do they measure? Like we're going to literally walk this through. So who do they measure when they do those statistics? Do they measure every company in the United States or Canada or Europe? No. They measure in Canada, really, like it used to be 1 or 2 companies, but like in the US, like let's call it 40, whatever, 50, 100, whatever. It's not all of them. So they measure a group of companies, okay, that provide the statistics for these definitions. Now, I always ask the person I'm talking to, I'll just ask you. So, Mike, do they include your company when they're doing the statistics?
I would imagine not.
They don't include mine. And so here's how I'm going to paraphrase a recession. This is, classic Gina. So basically, a bunch of other people's companies either had a bad couple of quarters or wrote stuff off or whatever on their papers. They went backwards. So other people's companies went backwards. And so now you're screwed. So just think about that for a minute. And then I know, blah, 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 whatever, not this. Okay. So what do they do with all the money? Do they put it in a pile and burn it? No. It's still there somewhere. Now, here's the thing. It might not be in the straight line place you expect it to be in. True. When cassette tape market dried up, that was it. That market dried up, but it went somewhere. But here's the thing. If you're stuck in the negative emotion of, whatever, panic or worry or whatever, in a recession, then you're looking for how to survive in the sort of what's in front of you. You don't have any creative faculties and you're certainly not looking, you know, to the side or whatever. So the problem is when you're wrapped up in the limiting decisions, you can't see the opportunities. Now, my whole exercise of the diet, the blah I just went on about, is to point out to you that there's another way of looking at it. And that's why I like to do that denominalization, because it's like, holy crap, where is the money? Now, if you start asking yourself that, where did it go? Notice how your reticular activating system is now activated to find it. That's different than lamenting that it's gone. So now you're looking for where it might be. And who knows, maybe this leads you into a new opportunity or a new thinking of your product, or I don't know. But my
So
point is,
let me take that and make that even more real for folks, because I think you're hitting on something really
yeah,
important. Is that because when I hear, well, it's, my company is not in that GDP measure. So it's other people, it's not me. But I could hear my clients saying, well, yeah, but my clients are saying they don't have the cash. I'm losing clients because they're not profitable. And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
because, but what you're saying, that's reality. But what you're saying is, I get it. And
Who
you
has
could
the
say,
cash?
right, right. So you could say, yeah, if you have this limiting decision that says, these are in this box here, these are my clients. And those folks aren't able to say they're not able to pay me anymore. So they're no longer clients. Well, that limiting decision of my clients are in this box. Yeah, you might be screwed.
It's
But
not my fault, right? Yeah.
if you step back and look at the entire Mona Lisa, instead of that grain of sand, which is the box of your clients,
Mhm.
and say, where's the money going? Maybe there are different industries. Maybe it's government work. Maybe I don't know what it is, but you step back and say, hey, and I've had a couple of times over the last few months where a client has said, they had one particular company, B2B company, one particular company making up too high a percent of their revenue. They
Yeah.
lose that client. Oh my God, now I got to lay people off. All right. You think maybe there's a lesson to be learned there? You think maybe there was a limiting decision and you allowing that one client to make up 45% of your entire business? You could cry about it and curl up in the corner. Or to your point, you could say, all right, maybe there's a different
So
decision I could make.
I was thinking of a story that's personal between you and me, and I want to share it with everybody. So when I met you, just so you guys know, when Mike called me, he was like adamant about setting up a coach, like I want to take NLP. I got a group of coaches and we basically made a curriculum for them, right? Do you remember that? That's how,
Well, first it was I just wanted to do it,
right.
and it
And
was
then,
nothing about then it was like,
yeah.
"All right, what if we brought a bunch of other
Right. Oh,
coaches?"
yeah.
Like,
The
"Oh, it's
dates didn't
interesting."
work for you. And you were like, I want my own course. I was like, bring me a group of people. But what have you guys always been saying to me about this content, right? You've been saying to me, put it online, break it up. It's, la, la, la. And I was like, can't be done, can't be done, can't be done. Now, March 13th, 2020, my revenue in all the businesses. So we have Greatness You, Scavenger Hunt Anywhere, all of it, zero, zero, zero. I want everybody to understand, not cash flow situation, zero revenue. And so we didn't have a choice. Like the nice thing about zero is it's like, holy crap, right? So we revamped the entire company. Did we get it right? No. But we just kept running. I call it ready, fire, aim. And here we are 3+ years later. And um, it's completely different. We chopped it all up, exactly what you guys were telling me. And I used to make this joke that sometimes fate speaks to us first in whispers and then a little bit louder, and then it kind of clocks us. And then it just grabs a cosmic 2x4 and smacks you across the forehead. So I needed to make those changes years ago, but I didn't have to. And listen, because there was no problem. It ain't broke. Don't fix it. Okay. So again, I'm not preaching from the pulpit. I live it. And then I just go out and teach people some of the pathways that might make it faster for them and less effort. Right. Like I do all the tripping and falling in the mud. And then I come back and go, there's a bump over there. And, like hole, whatever in the ground. And that's it. That's what we're up to. So you guys, I think of you guys a lot, that class in particular, because you were so like enthusiastic about, oh, if you just chop this up, more people would come. And, if you made some of it virtual. And I was like, nah, you can't do it on Zoom now. Now I don't know. Like, look at me. I got this stupid microphone. Like, how have I ever lived
I'm
without
trying
it?
did we hit you at that point and say, "That sounds like a limiting decision to me"? We
No, I don't
probably
think so.
did.
I think,
I don't we should have. If we
yeah,
could
you should have just
rewind, I would
smacked
say
me,
that.
right?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, it was just a funny story that I think of you guys whenever I deliver a course on Zoom or whatever, I chop up Master Prac or whatever. I go, kind of told me to do this. And had I done it when they said so, it wouldn't have been as, you know, exciting and painful.
I'm still waiting for the check for the percent of that
Right. Yeah.
business,
Yeah.
but we'll
Yeah,
talk
can you?
about that later. The other thing I want to talk about, which is a different topic, but incredibly related, is one of the things that when I spent all those days in Whistler, one of the things that blew my mind was the discussion about values. And one of the reasons it blew my mind is because the way I have always talked about values and the way, in a lot of cases, I still talk about values with my clients is the more traditional, what are your core values as a company? And these are the non negotiable behaviors. And you define values very differently than that. And we talked about how values can either hold you back or kind of propel you. Talk a little bit about personal values and how they could help anyone, but let's talk specifically about leaders in an organization, because there's a personal part to this and a business part to it.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about how you define values and how values impact us moving in the direction that we want to or think we want to go.
Right. Well, just so we're clear, it's not how I define it. It's an NLP thing, but it's what I teach. And very basically put, values are what you do or don't do, period. They are the fundamental driver of behavior, period. Now, they're not this bullshit that people, stencil on their wall. You'll notice there's no values on my wall because, that when you walk into a corporation and it says, we value honesty and integrity and all these words, the thing is, if I find one example where they're not behaving that way, I don't believe anything they say. Those aren't values. Those are aspirations, maybe, or hopes. Values are actually what drive your behavior. So, for example, I don't really like doing all my reporting and compliance and taxes. I don't like it. It's not what we like, but I value, right? You could either value being in integrity or compliance or value not being, you could value not getting busted or whatever. It doesn't even matter how you language it. So, but I would never stencil that on my corporate wall that I value compliance or something, right? But I do because I do those things and they're high on my list, right, of priorities. So values, the words, they're very high generalizations that direct all behavior, and they are a filter. So they are one of those filters that filters out the millions and billions and trillions. So that's one thing. The second component of values is, and I'm just going to borrow the dynamic that we teach. So we teach spiral dynamics, is this idea of values levels. So your values actually have an evolutionary path, right? So Claire Graves's work was all about spiral dynamics. So your values aren't something like that are tattooed on your skin when you're born and they never change. They actually evolve as you evolve. And so these values levels explain how it's possible that two people in the same organization could have very different behavior based on the evolution of their own value set. Now that alone is, as you know, mind exploding because it explains all human behavior. But then the next thing that, and I'm guessing that because I want to bring it back to your target market, like the people that you're talking to, if you are the founder or the key stakeholder in a company, typically your personal value set is very similar, if not the same, as the corporate value set. Okay. And this is where people maybe don't understand it. Now, if you are a hired gun in a ginormous organization that you didn't found, then that's different. But if you have any sort of key stakeholdership in the organization, then those two things are going to be very similar, whether you know it or not. So if you value security, if you're the CEO who values security personally, you have your 401ks maxed out and you got everything perfectly planned and security is a high value for you, but your company is like, I don't know, some sort of risk-oriented company like tech or whatever, where they're moving at the speed of light, there's going to be a clash because that value is going to hinder that company. You get it? So either you bring it to the surface and you find a way to integrate it, or it's going to work under the surface and it's just going to constantly create problems. So when there's a values misalignment between the C team, like the ELT, the executive leadership team, and the company in general, or even within the team. So if there are people on the team that are not aligned to each other, that's all going to play out and it's going to look like, air quote, stuff happening from the outside. It's not our fault. When really what we have is a values misalignment, either from the CEO or the top key stakeholder itself, or the team is misaligned, or the team and the company are misaligned. That all plays out in an incongruent value or results, incongruent, static, scattered. It looks like chaos.
So if you've got a company that quote unquote believes that the company believe, oh, it's really important we take care of our people or,
Sure.
our team members are
Yeah.
most important to us. But you've got a CEO and probably just the CEO, but I'll make it even say the CEO and some portion of the leadership team that when they truly look at what they value, and to your point, based on what they do and don't do, not based
Mhm.
on some aspiration, they look at what they value, and very high on the list is money, success, security, things. And somewhere not on the list or very far down on the list is relationships or those things
Or
related to
training and
people.
development.
And by the way, that doesn't I'm not judging that makes them bad people,
No,
right? But that's your point of a values misalignment of saying, well, look, if that's truly not what you value personally, and what I'm okay, well, the way I interpret it is all values are personal values.
yes,
If you have enough people at leadership that share those personal values,
then you
they
have a
kind of
team.
become what the
Yes,
company values, and you've got a
yes.
team that's very aligned. So if you've got I wanna go back to your example because I wanna talk about what you can do about it,
Oh, yeah.
and because you said values are not set in stone, they can evolve and change over time. So if you are in a high-tech company where if you're not growing at 30-40% a year, you look like you're standing still, and
Exactly.
if you've got, a VC or private equity backing you up that wants you to, in the next 2 or 3 years, you got to grow 300% and then sell. And you've gotten very high on your list of personal values, security, and risk and adventure is just nowhere to be found, but security is high up there. Does that mean you're shit out of luck and you need to change jobs, or is there something
Oh,
you
no.
can do about it?
Well, of course. I mean, as with anything, once you are able to look at the programs that are malfunctioning or maladapted, then you can simply change them. I mean, this is the power of NLP. You know, in NLP, we have a technique to literally change a value as it's held in the mind. But you got to want it. You got to be willing to do the technique, but it can be done. You have to do values alignment on the team, right? And you know that there's a technique for eliciting values, ranking them, and seeing, are we aligned or not? But it's not this sort of aspirational talk. It's like the mechanistic techniques of NLP give us the step by step linear capacity to work with the program that's not working. And often, especially in companies where the results kind of are like a, up and down, yo yo, scattered, inexplicable, there's usually a values problem, either a misalignment at the leadership level or a misalignment down below. I was working with this big consulting firm a long time ago when this was a big deal. And they were like, "Oh, we really value flexibility and diversity." And right, they say all these things. This is way before working from home was normal, just so we're clear. And, because they were noticing that they were losing women, really, really peak performing women as they were going out to start families. It was too much of a grind. And so they were just leaving the consulting world in general and they didn't want to lose them. And so they kind of put out this whole thing about valuing this and flexible work hours and work from home and all this. And it was always, I mean, don't even get me started. It was printed on pink paper. It was disgusting. But here was the problem, right? When you talk to the women that were in these sort of soon to be executive leadership roles, they would say, yeah, but all the partners, including the female partners, the women partners, they're working 70 hours a week. So it's corporate, it's career suicide not to do what they're doing. So they were saying, we value this because it was like a nice thing to say to retain people because, words are cheap kind of thing, but they weren't doing it. They didn't have a culture where that was obvious. Right. And so, you know, we do what we see, not what we're told. And so it was a complete a flop, a complete. And I was like, this is a disaster. Like, what are you doing? Right. Anyways, I didn't say what they wanted to hear.
But how does so if someone has got a value and maybe an unfair question because we spent a lot of time on this, so there may not be a quick
Right.
podcast
There's no quick
episode
fix.
answer
No.
to it. But if someone has got that they're in a business, like I said, it's high tech and they've got a
Yeah.
and high growth and you've got to take risks, and that's just not what they value right now. One answer absolutely could be I'm in the wrong place and they could leave. That's an
Sure.
answer.
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
but there is another answer which says, "Hey, I could change my values." If
Yes.
it and is there, and this is where I'm saying it may not be a fair question for you. Is there a quick way to explain to folks how they can go about change? Yeah, the answer might be go take an NLP
I
course
was
and we'll
going to
tell
say,
you how
take
to
an
do it.
NLP course,
But
hire Mike Goldman, or it was so important that we split values out as its own course. When you guys were telling me split it up Master Prac, we actually now took all the values and just put it into one course and that's it. That's the whole course. It's that important. So there is a quick fix, so to speak, if you understand all of it. But, I'm not going to teach for 3 days on your podcast. But what I think the most important thing to focus on is that if it is the problem, it is easily and with minimal effort fixed if it's identified. So someone like you and the people like you that I've coached and trained know how to do it. And so it's not this big baffling enigma. It's just, step one, step two, step three. And you're right. There could come a point where maybe there are the wrong bums in the wrong seats. I mean, that happens, right? And so better you should find it out and rectify it than just keep riding this question mark for the rest of your career. That's the best
yeah,
answer I can.
and I know from you, it boils down to at the end of the day just making a decision to
Right.
change it, and that you can make that decision a months long process, or it could, ultimately the decision happens in the snap of a finger. You could do a lot of stuff for 6 months leading up to that, or you could do it now. but you can make a decision and know that you're in charge.
But
The
it could be so big picture like that, like, get to cause, change your value. Like these are very broad. It could be also very specific. There could be just tips and techniques that NLP also provides that allow you to break the inertia in the moment, right? So the frustration one, like probably people on this listening or watching have been frustrated once in their life. So the way that you break the inertia where you're getting stuck in that frustration loop is just to look up and smile. Right. So everybody try that. Unless you're driving. Don't do it if you're driving. Right. So look up and smile. And what that does is as you know, kinesthetic is down. So looking up disconnects the kinesthetic loop. Okay. And smiling fires off a bunch of nourishing biochemicals that put you in a more resourceful state. Now, it doesn't solve your problem, but it breaks the inertia and it gives you a split second where you can make a different choice. Now, what did that take me? 25 seconds? It's something you can do like that. But if you make the choice to do it when you're stuck in that frustration inertia, it will reset you so that you can make a different choice or see a different opportunity. Now, these are little things that peak performers do regularly that regular people don't do, right? And I always say this, if the person listening, the leader, the C-level, whatever, or your people don't operate at your peak level of performance, whatever that is for you, then there's money on the table, period. This is not a soft skill, right? Those companies that value their people and all that, they usually spend more money on coffee and tea and stuff in the, plant watering than they do on training and nurturing the people and the relationships in their organization. And that's a true story because that's the industry I'm in. They say to me, oh, these are soft skills. Baloney. Baloney. The first day I worked at Procter & Gamble, the very first day back in the early 90s, they said, take away our brands, take away our factories, take away our offices, take away our patents. If you knew how many patents they held, that's a big thing. Leave us our people and we will rebuild this company in record time. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. And you know what? That is how they operate. I could not believe. Then you look at them and they've been successful for as long as they have through multiple crises, multiple economies, many recessions, many governments, a couple of wars, and yet they're still here. And it's not because this is better than that or whatever. It's something to do with the way they stick inside their values. And I remember thinking at the time when I was in my very early 20s going, whoa, this is unique, and didn't realize it or appreciate it till I was out, right? How unique it was. So it's it it can be these big picture things which seem very overwhelming, or it can be tiny little things. Like what if the CEO, and this is very real, is prone to worry? What if they're always worrying? I heard this the other day from a hedge fund manager, right? So stressful environment right now, which it is. It's turbulent, chaotic, and that makes humans that like to stand on the ground, that makes them nervous. Well, what if worrying about it is making it worse, right? Like I always say, worrying is like praying for what you don't want. I mean, that's utterly ridiculous, right? So
Yeah.
you know where I'm going with this. Now, I've got this quick technique called the anxiety eraser, and you only have to do it every single time you feel anxious or worry. And what it does is one, eliminates the anxiety, as you know, in the moment. And two, it highlights how much of your day you're spending focusing on what you don't want. And that alone, for a lot of people, is like earth shattering. Now, do you think we have time to quickly teach
let's
the?
do it. I was
Okay.
going to say that that'll be before we wrap up. That'll be
Yeah.
the last gift
Here's my
we give
gift to
everybody.
you.
Go ahead.
Right. You're welcome. This is called the anxiety eraser. So, I mean, Mike, you kind of know where this comes from. There's a lot of content behind this. So you're just going to have to roll with me. Those of you listening that don't know everything about this body of knowledge. And then if you want to learn more, then find Mike or find me. So the anxiety eraser comes from a body of knowledge that's similar to NLP, a mechanistic model that's called timeline therapy. Here's what's important is you need to work with your timeline. Now, it's as simple as imagining your timeline. Just close your eyes and imagine your life laid out in a line. But if that's not your jam, here's a quick way to discover your timeline. Just think of something in your past. Like Mike, you were where last week? When were you in Toronto, or like where were you?
Last week.
Yeah.
Toronto
You were
and
in
Florida
Toronto.
last week,
Yeah.
yeah.
And where did that memory come from when it just flew into your mind to talk about? Did it come from above, behind? Just
Now
point.
over to the left.
Okay. So your memory came in from the left. So your past is somewhere to your left. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, to your left. And next week you said you're going back to Florida,
Yes.
right? And that's already kind of formed, like it's happening. The plane tickets are bought
Yep,
and stuff.
yep,
So where does that, live in your timeline? Is it
over to the
over,
right.
over to your right? Okay. So those of you who are listening, just play with me. Assuming you're not driving, if I were to ask you what direction your past is, just point to it. So up, down, left, right, what doesn't matter. So for Mike, it's left. And if I were to ask you your future, just point to it. Okay, so for Mike, that's right. For you, it could be down, up, doesn't matter. Notice this implies a line. That's your timeline, end of story. Okay, if you need more, call me. So you have a timeline. Now, everybody who's got a timeline, the next step you have to do is you have to see it in your mind's eye, i.e., imagine, something that 5-year-olds can do. So you close your eyes, if you're driving, do this later, right? So what you do is you need a specific event you're worried about. So let's say you're worried about, I don't know, cash flow, because that's obviously a thing. Okay. So, so you need a specific event because you have to work on a specific event. Notice how what you're worried about exists in the future. So anxiety and worry are technically fear of the future. Okay. So what you do is you get your timeline in your mind's eye. Okay. So it might help to close your eyes, but definitely not if you're driving. So then what you do is you imagine you're Superman or Superwoman and you lift up above your timeline and you hover above it. And you're looking down on it in your mind's eye. Okay. Now do what I say very specifically and it'll erase the anxiety or worry. So float above the timeline like a hovering Superman, Superwoman perspective, looking down on your timeline, float out into the future, keep going until you get to 15 minutes past the successful completion of the event you think you're worried about, right? So go 15 minutes past the successful completion of this event. So 15 minutes past the successful cash flow report or whatever it is, 15 minutes past, and turn your perspective 180 degrees and look down the timeline into the past and notice that it turned out well and your anxiety or worry will erase. Now, finish the process by remaining above the timeline, come back into the room that you're sitting in, drop back into your body and open your eyes. Mike, feeling good? Anxiety
Every
erased?
time I do it.
Every
Every
time.
time I do it.
Now,
And
here's the key. Every time.
yeah, you don't do this once and go, "Oh, I now I could better deal with anxiety. I don't have anxiety anymore." No, it's gonna happen, and now you have a technique to
And
use.
here's why. Because anxiety is a direct result of focusing on what you don't want. And here's the thing. Because of the millions, billions, trillions, hundreds filters, you get what you focus on. So as a peak performer, do you think you should be focusing on what you want or focusing on what you don't want? It's like a no-brainer.
So a wonderfully simple question you could ask when you are stressed and, have anxiety, overwhelmed, is just, "What do I want?"
Right.
Is
Or
also a great question to ask, because you probably focus on all the things that can go wrong. What do you want?
and even change your words. So instead of having anxiety or worry, just say, "Oh, I'm doing anxiety or worry," because that then causes you immediately in the moment to realize if you're doing it, you can undo it. And if you undo it every time, I had one client who this was their main complaint. And they were doing this like 1,000 times a day. And finally, they just called me up and said, "I realized it was just easier to focus on what I want than to spend all this time, you know, doing this process." Well, that's the goal, right? Because peak
Yep, then do
performers
that.
focus on what they want because you get what you focus on, period. So that's a little trick. It's very popular and it's a nice, easy, quick fix. And you can do it just every single time you choose to do anxiety or worry, which is
Like, just
really just,
pull the car over first.
yeah, pull the car over. But here's the thing, Tad James was my teacher, was one of my teachers. And he came up with that phrase that anxiety is a warning sign to focus on what you want. So technically, it's doing you a favor. But if you don't attend to it, right, and rectify your focus, if you don't attend to your anxiety or worry and rectify your focus in the minute, second, millisecond you feel it or notice it, then it wreaks havoc in your body and it is not good for you. I want to be clear because a lot of people suffer the effects of anxiety, but it's because they aren't checking it. They aren't bringing their focus back to what they want. And therefore their anxiety is running in a loop. It's like
Gina,
a
the only frustrating part of this conversation for me is I know we can go on for about another
I
31
know.
days, and I don't think people will listen that long, but they
No.
can call you if they want to. So, in wrapping up, how can folks get in touch with you to learn more, do more?
Well, I think the easiest way is my link tree. And I don't know if everybody uses Linktree, but it's linktr.ee/Gina Mollicone, right? That because we're always changing that. And my last name is spelled Mollicone. But if you're just like super lazy and you want to go straight to the courses, we're Greatness U, the letter U, like yes, you, greatnessu.com.
Excellent. That'll all be in the show notes if you want to look. But Gina, thanks so much. Amazing stuff and, ton of value. So thanks for doing this.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I mean, I could talk to you all day. So have a great trip next week. And thank you for having me. It really was an honor.
Thanks.